In the summer of 1931, an American driver could pull into a filling station, buy gasoline, and pay no federal tax on a single gallon. There were state gasoline taxes in most of the country, but Washington had not yet placed its own charge at the pump. The federal government was helping build roads, automobiles were transforming daily life, and public officials were promising a connected nation. So who paid for all of it? The answer begins long before the gas tax, when roads were treated as local property, private opportunity, and sometimes an obligation that citizens paid with their own labor. It ends with a tiny levy created during a fiscal emergency that became one of the most durable links between movement, money, and federal power. For most of early American history, roads were local. A path connecting farms to a market benefited a town or county more visibly than it benefited a distant national government. Construction and maintenance therefore fell mainly to local authorities, landowners, and private companies. The federal role was controversial because the Constitution did not clearly describe a general national road-building power. Many communities used statute labor. Instead of paying the entire road cost in cash, able-bodied men were required to spend a certain number of days working on local roads or provide someone to work in their place. They cleared brush, filled holes, and repaired bridges with hand tools and local materials. The system made sense where cash was scarce and traffic was light. It produced roads of uneven quality because maintenance depended on local capacity and willingness. Property taxes financed another share. Roads increased the value and accessibility of land, so landowners were expected to support them. Counties issued bonds for larger projects. Towns charged fees or directed general revenue toward bridges and streets. The result was a patchwork. Wealthy areas could build more. Poor or sparsely populated areas struggled. Private turnpike companies offered a different model. Investors received charters to build improved roads and recover their money through tolls. A traveler stopped at a gate and paid according to the vehicle, animals or goods being moved. The turnpike promised better surfaces without placing the entire cost on taxpayers. But toll roads had limitations. Collection was expensive. Travelers avoided gates when possible. Rural traffic might not generate enough revenue to maintain a long route. Investors wanted profitable corridors. Not every road a community needed. Many turnpikes eventually deteriorated, were purchased by governments, or became public roads. The federal government did participate in selected projects. The National Road, begun in the early 19th century, connected the Potomac region toward the west and became an important symbol of internal improvement. Yet federal support for roads, canals, and other projects repeatedly triggered constitutional and political disputes. Should national money build infrastructure that appeared to favor particular states? Did Congress have the authority? Would federal projects invite corruption? Railroads temporarily made the road question seem less central. During the 19th century, rail networks carried people and freight over long distances far more efficiently than wagon roads. Local roads mainly connected farms and towns to stations. The national transportation system could expand through private railroad corporations, land grants, and state support without requiring a paved public highway to every community. Then the automobile changed the scale of the problem. Early cars were expensive novelties, but production methods made them increasingly available. Drivers expected roads that horses and wagons had never required. Smoother surfaces, gentler grades, clearer signs, stronger bridges, and maintenance across political boundaries. Mud in one county could interrupt a journey planned across several states. Bicyclists had already organized for better roads in the late 19th century. The Good Roads movement argued that improved routes benefited farmers, postal service, commerce, and public life. Rural free delivery strengthened the case. If the federal government promised to carry mail to scattered households, passable roads became part of a national service. Automobile owners added political power and urgency. Registration fees and license fees became ways to make users support the system. States experimented with vehicle taxes based on horsepower, weight, or value. The principle was emerging that the people who used and damaged roads should contribute directly to them. The first state gasoline tax was adopted by Oregon in 1919. It charged 1 cent per gallon. Other states followed rapidly. Gasoline consumption was closely connected to road use. Collection could be concentrated among distributors or filling stations, and the tax was less visible than an annual property assessment. Every driver paid in proportion to fuel purchased. By the end of the 1920s, every state had adopted a gasoline tax. The tax helped finance a massive expansion of paved roads. It also created a political promise known as dedication or earmarking. Motorists were told that money collected from fuel would be used for highways. The payment felt like a user fee rather than a general tax. That promise was never perfectly simple. Roads benefited people who did not drive. They supported commerce, emergency services, agriculture, postal delivery, and national defense. Drivers also imposed costs beyond pavement, including congestion, accidents, and pollution. A per-gallon tax captured some relationship between use and payment, but not every benefit or cost. The federal government increased its role through grants to states. The Federal Aid Road Act of 1916 and later legislation created partnerships in which national money supported approved road projects while states built and maintained them. This arrangement respected state administration while acknowledging that roads formed an interstate network. Federal aid came from general revenues rather than a dedicated federal gasoline tax. Customs, income taxes, and other receipts supported the Treasury, and Congress appropriated money for highways. In other words, a person who did not own a car could help pay for roads through the national tax system. Supporters saw roads as a public investment. Critics questioned whether motorists should bear more of the cost. The road-building boom transformed the country. Farmers gained access to wider markets. Tourists traveled farther. Roadside businesses appeared. Cities expanded outward. Trucks competed with railroads. Automobiles changed where people lived, worked, and shopped. A funding system created for transportation began reshaping land, commerce, and social life. The Great Depression interrupted that expansion. After 1929, incomes fell, business activity contracted, and tax revenues declined. At the same time, governments faced demands for relief and employment. Road construction could put people to work, but the Treasury needed money to finance both existing obligations and emergency responses. President Herbert Hoover entered office committed to fiscal responsibility, and the federal budget deteriorated as the Depression deepened. Income tax receipts collapsed because incomes and profits collapsed. Congress sought new revenue through the Revenue Act of 1932, one of the largest peacetime tax increases to that point. Among its many provisions was the first federal tax on gasoline, set at 1 cent per gallon. It was introduced as an emergency revenue measure rather than as the permanent foundation of a national highway trust fund. The logic was practical. Gasoline was widely consumed, distribution channels made collection possible, and even a small levy could produce significant revenue. 1 cent sounds trivial, but prices and wages were far lower. The tax arrived when families and businesses were already under severe pressure. A motorist paid state gasoline tax and now a federal charge as well. Truckers, farmers, and companies using fuel saw the cost repeated across every trip. The federal tax was not originally dedicated exclusively to roads. It flowed into general revenue. This distinction matters because the modern public often assumes that gasoline taxes were created as a direct highway fee. At the federal level, the first levy was a response to a budget emergency. The road finance identity developed later. Congress changed the rate and extended the tax rather than allowing it to disappear. Temporary taxes have a way of becoming durable when government discovers both a continuing need for revenue and an administrative system capable of collecting it. Each extension made the levy more normal. Drivers adjusted to a pump price that included invisible layers of tax. Now place a 1930s filling station receipt under glass. It lists gallons, price per gallon, and a total paid in coins and small bills. The pump attendant has wiped the windshield and checked the oil. The driver sees one price on the pump, but inside that number are separate claims: payment for crude oil, refining, transport, retail operation, state tax, and the new federal penny. Take a 10-gallon purchase. The federal charge adds 10 cents. To a modern viewer, 10 cents seems insignificant. To a worker earning Depression-era wages, it can represent part of a meal or another necessary purchase. A truck using hundreds of gallons turns the penny into dollars, and those dollars enter the cost of every load delivered. The receipt reveals the political strength of a consumption tax. No official visits the driver's home. No annual federal gasoline form arrives. The money is collected through the transaction and transmitted through businesses. The taxpayer experiences the tax as part of a price. Administrative efficiency and political invisibility reinforce one another. The same receipt also reveals fairness problems. A wealthy and a poor driver pay the same tax per gallon. Rural households may need to drive farther because work, schools, and stores are distant. Urban residents may have public transportation alternatives. A fuel tax charges use, but the ability to avoid that use is distributed unevenly. During the New Deal, road building became part of employment and recovery policy. Public works constructed highways, bridges, and local roads. The projects did more than improve transportation. They moved federal money into communities and put unemployed people to work. Infrastructure became both a physical asset and an economic tool. The Second World War changed priorities. Fuel was rationed, civilian driving was restricted, and the transportation network served military mobilization. Highways revealed their strategic value by moving troops, materials, and industrial output. After the war, automobile ownership and suburban growth accelerated, creating demand for a system far beyond the scale of pre-war roads. The most important transformation came in the 1950s. President Dwight D. Eisenhower supported a national system of interstate highways, influenced by defense concerns, commercial needs, and the poor condition of many long-distance routes. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 authorized the Interstate Highway System and created the Highway Trust Fund. Federal gasoline and other highway user taxes were now dedicated to the fund. The political bargain became explicit. Users paid at the pump, and the money financed roads. The trust fund structure protected highway revenue from competing claims and gave construction a dependable stream of financing. This system built one of the largest infrastructure networks in history. Limited access highways reduced travel times, connected metropolitan areas, supported trucking, and reorganized supply chains. Businesses could locate farther from rail lines. Families could live farther from city centers. Tourism and roadside commerce expanded. The benefits were enormous, but they were not evenly distributed. Highway routes cut through urban neighborhoods, frequently communities with limited political power. Homes and businesses were demolished. Noise and pollution followed. Investment encouraged suburban development while weakening some urban centers. A funding system designed around driving made more driving necessary. The gas tax, therefore, did more than pay for roads. It helped create a country structured around the automobile. Because revenue grew with fuel consumption, transportation agencies had a financial relationship with driving. More miles and larger vehicles meant more gallons and more money for construction. For decades, this relationship appeared stable. Fuel consumption rose with population, vehicle ownership, and travel. Congress increased the federal rate at various points. A relatively small charge on an expanding volume of gasoline supported continuing highway investment. But the system contained a long-term contradiction. Successful energy policy encourages vehicles to use less fuel. Electric vehicles used no gasoline at all. Inflation raises construction costs, while a cents per gallon tax loses real value if the nominal rate does not increase. The better the country becomes at reducing fuel consumption, the weaker the traditional road finance base becomes. The federal gasoline tax has remained politically difficult to raise. Drivers see the price every time they fill a tank, and politicians know that fuel costs are emotionally powerful. The tax may be partly hidden inside the posted price, But any proposed increase becomes highly visible. As highway trust fund spending exceeds dedicated revenue, Congress transfers money from general funds, weakening the old user pays promise. States have experimented with higher fuel taxes, indexing, tolling, and charges based on vehicle miles traveled. Each alternative has trade-offs. Tolls can target particular facilities, but require collection systems and may divert traffic. Mileage fees track road use more directly, but raise privacy and administrative questions. Registration charges on electric vehicles compensate for missing fuel tax, but do not vary by actual driving. The debate reveals that roads were never funded by one pure principle. Early Americans used labor obligations, property taxes, and tolls. States added registration and gasoline taxes. The federal government used general revenue, fuel taxes, trust funds, and borrowing. Every era blended user payments with broad public support because roads serve both individual drivers and the larger economy. The phrase user pays sounds simple until we ask who the user is. The driver uses the pavement. The online shopper uses the delivery network. A person without a car uses roads through buses, ambulances, food supply, and public services. A manufacturer uses them to receive parts. National defense uses them during emergencies. The benefits spread farther than the fuel tank. Environmental costs complicate the calculation. The gasoline tax discourages fuel use slightly and can be understood as a charge connected to pollution. But the American rate was designed mainly for revenue, not as a comprehensive carbon price. It does not directly measure congestion, local air quality, or the damage caused by vehicle weight. Heavy vehicles create much more pavement wear than light cars, yet per-gallon fuel consumption only approximates that difference. Electric trucks may impose road wear without buying taxable gasoline. Technology is pulling the link between fuel and infrastructure apart. The original federal penny survived because it was easy to collect and attach to a growing activity. It did not require every driver to file a return. A small number of companies could transmit the revenue. The tax reached millions of road users through a transaction they already made. Good tax administration often depends less on perfect theory than on finding a practical collection point. That is the hidden story inside the filling station receipt. The driver thinks he is buying motion. The government sees a taxable flow passing through a narrow channel. Every gallon records use, generates revenue, and helps finance the system that makes the next gallon useful. The pump becomes a toll gate without a barrier. Before gasoline taxes, payment was more visible in other ways. A citizen spent days repairing a road. A traveler handed coins to a turnpike keeper. A landowner saw a property assessment. The gas tax reduced those separate encounters to a few cents inside a commodity price. It made road finance feel automatic. Automatic systems become difficult to reconsider because entire industries and institutions grow around them. Contractors plan projects. States depend on federal grants. Communities plan development around highways. Households buy homes based on driving time. The tax does not simply finance asphalt. It helps stabilize a physical pattern of life. The future may require a new pattern. If gasoline consumption falls substantially, governments must decide whether roads are financed through mileage, electricity use, general taxes, tolls, or some combination. The choice will distribute costs differently among urban and rural residents, drivers and non-drivers, private cars, and commercial vehicles. The lesson from 1932 is that funding systems are created by immediate problems and then acquire purposes their designers did not anticipate. Congress needed revenue during the Depression. The tax became permanent. Later lawmakers connected it to a trust fund. The trust fund helped build an interstate network. The network transformed settlement, commerce, and energy use. So who paid for roads before the federal gasoline tax? Local taxpayers, landowners, toll road travelers, citizens performing labor, state motorists, and federal taxpayers generally. There was no single answer because the road system itself was not one national machine. It became one through decades of coordination and money. The federal gasoline tax did not invent American roads. It created a durable method for collecting from a rapidly growing stream of users. Its success came from matching a tax to the technology that defined the century. The automobile burned fuel, the pump measured fuel, and the government captured a fraction of each measured unit. Now the technology is changing, and the old match is weakening. That does not make the gasoline tax a historical failure. It makes it a reminder that no revenue system is permanent. The country once built roads without a federal fuel levy. It can build them after gasoline declines. But the replacement will still have to answer the same political question that confronted the turnpike, the property assessment, and the pump. Who pays for movement? The person behind the wheel, the property owner whose land gains value, the business whose goods reach a market, or every citizen who depends on a connected country? The penny added in 1932 offered one practical answer. It was never the only possible answer, and it was never only about roads. It was about the power to turn millions of ordinary journeys into a national resource. It was about making infrastructure finance nearly invisible, and it was about a bargain that shaped modern America. Each time you buy the fuel that lets you travel, you also help pay for the world that makes the travel possible. The next time the pump stops and the receipt curls from the machine, the tax line may look like a minor detail beside the total price. Historically, it is the record of an enormous institutional shift. Road work moved from compulsory days with a shovel, scattered toll gates and local property rolls, into a national stream of money collected a few gallons at a time. The payment is small enough to disappear inside a trip, but repeated across a continent, it helped determine where cities expanded, how goods moved, and what Americans came to consider a normal distance from home. That is why the future of the tax matters, even to people who never think about it. When the revenue model changes, the geography built around it does not disappear. The highways still require repair, bridges still age, and every delivery still occupies public space. America's next road tax may not be collected from gasoline at all, but it will inherit the same task, turning private movement into enough public money to keep the country connected.